13 years. That's how long a killer could seemingly disappear, right there in Long Island.
Yeah, it's pretty chilling when you think about it, especially in such a populated area.
And it's something the Dark Coast podcast really dug into. We're going to take a deep dive into their chat with Alex Morgan and retired NYPD Detective Mark Russo about the Gilgo Beach murders.
Right. The big question hanging over everything is, why? Why has the Long Island serial killer, LISK, stayed hidden for so long?
That's exactly what we want to unpack today. What are those key reasons?
Well, looking at their analysis, it's clear it's not just about, a lack of evidence. It seems way more complicated.
So?
There's this whole mix of things, potential misconduct, even deep-seated biases that might have really hampered things from the get-go. It casts a real shadow.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It all kicked off in 2010, didn't it? The search for Shanann Gilbert, an escort who went missing.
Mm-hmm. And that search stumbled onto something much, much bigger.
10 bodies along Ocean Parkway. Just awful. And the first 4 found Megan Waterman, Melissa Bartholomew, Amber Costello, Maureen Brainard-Barnes.
The Gilgo 4, yeah. All sex workers, all strangled, wrapped in burlap. A clear pattern there, initially.
But then the other 6. That's where it gets really strange. Detective Russo pointed this out on Dark Coasts. You've got a toddler, a man in women's clothing.
Right. It throws a real wrench in things. Is it one killer whose targets just shifted wildly? Or are we possibly looking at, more than one person?
It makes you really question the whole profile, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That initial diversity of victims forces you to ask, one killer, wide range, or multiple killers whose paths just happen to cross geographically. The Gilgo 4 link is strong, but the others, they add layers, complexities you can't just ignore.
And then there's Shanann Gilbert herself. The details around her case are just deeply unsettling.
That 911 call.
Oh yeah, hearing excerpts, they're trying to kill me. It's harrowing. But the official ruling, accidental drowning.
Which Detective Russo, on the Source podcast, clearly wasn't buying. Not at all.
No. He brought up things like allegations the 911 tape was edited, a slow dispatcher response.
Mm-hmm. And then the huge issue of James Burke, Suffolk County Police Chief at the time.
Right. This is where it gets really dark. Burke actively stopped the FBI from helping early on. This is the same guy who later went to jail for beating up a suspect.
Which just screams potential obstruction, doesn't it? You look at the timeline, his later actions, it just puts a cloud over everything the local PD did or didn't do back then.
Exactly. Those claims about the 911 tape, the slow response. It suggests maybe Shanann's call wasn't taken seriously enough. Perhaps deliberately.
That's a disturbing thought, and it gets worse.
The cell phone, right? Burke's cell phone reportedly found near where they found Shanann's remains.
Yeah. I mean, what are the chances? Especially given he was trying so hard to keep the FBI out of it.
Russo basically suggested it was way more than a coincidence. He strongly implied, a cover-up.
And you have to think, if the head of the local police is actively pushing away federal help on a potential serial killer case...
That's a massive red flag.
Huge. It didn't just limit resources. It could have created this whole atmosphere where maybe evidence wasn't handled right or leads just weren't followed up.
Okay, so switching gears slightly, but still related.
Yeah.
The killer's methods. Dark Coasts talked about this.
Yeah.
Using burner phones to actually taunt the families.
Yeah, that detail about Melissa Bartholomew's sister getting calls.
I'm the one who killed her.
Yeah.
Just ice cold. Pure cruelty.
It shows this calculated psychological game, doesn't it? Wanting control even after the act itself.
And Russo's analysis suggested the killer was probably pretty tech-savvy, right?
Yeah.
Comfortable with those burner phones. And maybe had some law enforcement or military training.
That's the profile they were leaning towards. The tech side, the potential training. It suggests a certain sophistication, someone who knew how not to get caught easily.
And the location itself. Gilgo Beach. It's sort of remote, that stretch, but it's right near wealthy spots like Oak Beach. And Russo's theory, which kind of makes a grim sort of sense, is that the killer was probably local, knew the area intimately, had the resources maybe to use that isolation.
Yeah, the geography feels really key. Knowing the terrain, knowing where you could go unnoticed, maybe even having connections in those communities.
It all could have helped them operate for so long. That contrast, isolated dumping grounds near well-off areas, it does make you wonder about the killer's life, their social access.
Definitely.
Really does sound like the initial investigation was, plagued by problems from the start.
Dark Coasts certainly hammered that point. Allegations the Suffolk County PD really dropped the ball early on.
And a big part of that, it seems, was bias against the victims themselves.
Tragically, yes. This idea that because they were sex workers, they were high risk, and somehow their cases didn't get the same urgency.
That's just heartbreaking.
It is, and that kind of bias, that devaluing of certain lives that can mean critical time gets lost right at the beginning, makes it so much harder to catch someone.
And then you layer on the James Burke situation, the alleged corruption. It feels like a huge roadblock.
Oh, absolutely. Refusing FBI help, plus those accusations that he might have been involved with sex workers? It's alarming.
It raises this horrible possibility, doesn't it, that the person supposed to be leading the investigation was maybe undermining it, possibly to protect himself.
If that's true, it creates this climate of fear, of distrust. Who's going to come forward with information then? It just grinds everything to a halt.
There is some movement now, right? The Dark Coast piece mentioned recent developments.
Yeah, a bit of hope. DA Ray Tierney started a new task force in 2022.
They're apparently going back through everything. 1,000 tips, testing hundreds of DNA samples.
And looking into genetic genealogy, too, though Russo acknowledged the challenges there.
Right, like the killer probably wore gloves, and the burial sites being near the water, tidal areas, DNA might be degraded.
Exactly. It's a powerful tool, genetic genealogy, but not foolproof, especially in cases like this with potential countermeasures and environmental issues.
There was also a lot of focus on the Oak Beach community itself.
Yeah, described as really small, tight-knit.
And the question that hangs there is, why the silence? If the killer was local, maybe even from there, why has no one talked?
It's deeply unsettling. The podcast suggested, maybe fear, or even more chillingly, complicity. Someone knows something but isn't saying.
That idea is just, wow. Living in a small community like that, knowing something potentially crucial.
It points to some really complex social dynamics. Fear of payback, maybe not trusting the police after everything with Burke, or, maybe even knowing more than they let on. Getting past that silence is tough in cold cases.
Dark Coasts did mention a few names that have come up as potential suspects over the years.
John Bittrolf was one, convicted of 2 other murders, and there was that connection to burlap.
Right. And James Burke, obviously, the disgraced chief. Means motive, he's on the list.
Definitely a figure of interest given his position and the corruption allegations.
And then just the general unnerving idea of an unidentified Oak Beach resident, someone hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, that theory taps right back into the local knowledge idea, someone who blended in.
And this ongoing debate, one killer or more.
Still a huge question mark.
The Gilgo 4 with the burlap. That feels like one person's signature, doesn't it?
It certainly suggests a single actor for those 4, yeah. Very specific method. But the other 6 victims don't all fit that exact pattern.
But as Russo pointed out, it's possible a single killer just changed, evolved their methods or who they targeted over time.
It is possible. So you have compelling arguments both ways. Strong similarities for the 4, but enough differences with the others to keep the multiple killer theory alive. The burlap and disposal method are consistent links, though. It's a central puzzle.
The team at Dark Coasts ended with a direct appeal, and we absolutely want to echo that right now. If you, listening to this, maybe spent time around Oak Beach back then, or maybe you know someone who just didn't seem right, who fits some part of this picture.
Please call the tip line.
Yeah, it's 1-800-228-TIP-ES. Seriously, no detail is too small. It might be the one thing they need.
That's the hope, isn't it?
Yeah.
That even now, someone out there had that missing piece.
So wrapping up this deep dive, it's just so clear the Gilgo Beach case was hit by this perfect storm, really.
A toxic mix.
Yeah. Alleged corruption high up in the police force, this awful bias that might have slowed things down because of who the first victims were, and potentially a very smart, very careful killer who knew how to use those exact problems to their advantage.
And looking at the big picture, the failures here really highlight why you need integrity in law enforcement top to bottom and why we have to fight against those biases that mean some victims just don't get the same justice.
Absolutely. And it's crucial to remember, this isn't over. It's not truly cold.
No, definitely not.
Like Dark Coast said, starkly, LISK is still out there. They might think they got away with it.
Chilling thought.
But every conversation like this, every news story, every tip, it chips away at the mystery. It brings us closer. So, stay aware, stay vigilant.
And maybe this leaves you thinking, What does it say about us, about society, when a case like this goes unsolved for so long? What does it reveal about how we value different people's lives? And what needs to change systemically to stop this happening again? Something to reflect on, definitely. The human cost is just immense.